Hello, everybody. I just wanted to talk a little bit more in depth about this upcoming season of my podcast and its base topic, which is gender stereotypes and expectations. And I wanted to upload this video prior to uploading my first official episode of the podcast, which will be out next week, by the way. But the reason why I wanted to upload this video prior to the official first episode of my podcast was just because I wanted us all to kind of be on the same wavelength. And one of the main things, I guess, that I wanted to get across for this video in particular is that, this video and, all of my other podcasts, these are not meant to hurt anybody. My aim with this and all of my podcasts are to be unbiased and to explore different perspectives of a certain topic. So I do just want to make that absolutely clear. My aim here is definitely not to actually hurt anyone's feelings or anything like that. So I guess what we're just going to do for the rest of this podcast is to delve a tiny bit into gender-exclusive stereotypes. So, of course, gender stereotypes are not just in our media, but they're in our everyday life. We come across them all the time. And, of course, the act of stereotyping certain people can be because of many different reasons: age, race, gender, sexuality. But for this season of my podcast, I am purely wanting to just focus on gender stereotyping. And that's because the other topics are going to be far too big, and I want them to have their own season later on, maybe if my podcast, if you guys enjoy my podcast. And what I found actually very interesting about this was when I was researching into this topic, I realised just how many articles and whatnot that gender stereotyping has. And one particular piece that interested me quite a lot was one on the Planned Parenthood website, which I will link down below. And it talks in some detail actually about what gender stereotyping is and how we can prevent it, and also how it harms the people that you're stereotyping. It's very, very interesting, and it also kind of delves a little bit into gender-specific roles. And another article actually which caught my eye was a one talking about breaking gender stereotyping early in a child's life, which I will also of course link down below for those of you who are interested. I thought it was a different and interesting perspective on gender stereotyping and what gender is and how we should introduce it to our children. Society, I actually think, is progressing and developing and changing all the time, every single day. However, I do realise that there are still so many things that we have not developed enough and things that we should be progressing with, which I personally believe, that we're not making a reasonable amount of progress with. And gender exclusive stereotypes, I believe, is definitely a prime example of that. We as a society have such a strong and overwhelmingly strong belief that certain genders should act, look and behave a certain way. And all of this, of course, comes from tradition. Of course, we know traditionally the lady stayed at home to look after the kids, cook and clean, whereas the men would go out to work all day, they would make money, and that was how life was. And if you stepped out of your role, there would be just very interesting consequences, and it was just crazy. Times are changing with things like that, but not quick enough, personally, in my opinion. In my jobs, I've had people speak down to me because of my gender, and I've had to deal with what I think personally to be very unacceptable behaviour from other people, and I'm sure we've all at some point in our lives gone through that. Every single person, I'm sure, has been subjected to some kind of gender exclusive stereotyping, and no matter the gender as well, just because I'm a woman, it doesn't mean that when I say gender exclusive stereotyping, I'm not just going to be talking about women. I'm also going to be talking about men. I'm going to be doing a lot of research about men's stereotyping and things like that. So yes, this is not just me, for the rest of the podcast season talking about women, women, women. Men do get stereotyped as well, and there are certain things that society traditionally believes that men should behave. They should be tough, they should be the tough guy, and they should never cry, and they should never show their emotions, and things like that. So I all still definitely find that very, very interesting. So some of the topics I'll actually be discussing this season, things aren't all set in stone. However, most of these I'm going to be doing for sure. So some of the topics I'll be discussing this season for my podcast are hairstyles and stereotypes, which will be uploaded for you guys about next week, masculinity and makeup, why should men have to be masculine, gender stereotypes within the household, and gender stereotypes in the workplace. So I think that's pretty much it for today. It was just a quick podcast to, I guess give a little bit more detail about the kinds of things I'll be discussing and, things like that, and a bit, I guess a bit more of an introduction to the actual base topic, rather than us delving straight into it. So I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, leave it a thumbs up. And if you're new here, click on that subscribe button. Thank you so much for watching, or rather listening, and I will see you guys in my next video.